everybody, Charles for HumbleMechanic.com, and this is episode 33 of the Humble Mechanic podcast. On this show, I'm going to be taking your questions from email. If you would like to submit a question for a show like this, shoot me an email to charles@humblemechanic.com, and make sure you put question for Charles in the subject so that I know specifically why you're sending me an email. Before we get rolling into the show, I want to do a quick shout out to Volkswagen of America. That's one I never thought I would be able to do a shout out to, but they contacted me and hooked me up with some really sweet driver gear. My auto shirt I'm wearing today, this really awesome plaid hat, and Wolfsburg paraphernalia. If you guys have seen some of the other shows where the camera's zoomed out a little bit, you know that these are both Volkswagen signs here that I got from our dealership remodel. So as a Volkswagen guy, I'm more than happy to wear driver's gear, but I'll put a link to in the show notes where you guys can get some of this stuff. Again, super shout out to Volkswagen for hooking me up with some gear and let me rock the brand a little bit, and I really appreciate that. So thanks, guys. I'm actually pushing them a little bit to hook me up with a Golf R for a week or so to do some fun video work. So maybe we can get there before the car comes out. All right, let's get rolling into your questions. I got the laptop, not the iPad today. My wife commandeered the iPad, so we're gonna rock on the laptop. First question comes from Ken. He says he loves the show. Thanks, Ken. And he says that I mentioned in one of my videos about Volkswagen recommending not soldering wires. And he was just curious why. I've actually got this question a lot, so thanks, Ken, for that. I had to look it up because I forgot. I've spent so many years just doing crimp connections on our wiring that doing a solder on a dealership repair just isn't really in the norm for me. Officially, they say that introducing solder into the wires can actually increase resistance in a wire. That comes from the self-study program. So that's their official answer. I have some of my own thoughts. These aren't Volkswagen official answers. These are my thoughts. I think it's two reasons. And mostly, I think most guys just don't know how to solder very well. It's a safety thing. We don't want to risk damaging any control modules. I've actually seen a couple ECMs damaged by bad soldering in one way or another. I don't know how exactly it happened, but I've replaced many ECMs, not many, but a couple ECMs due to fried circuits inside the box. There's also a lot of really awkward places that we put ourselves in to make wiring repairs, underneath dashes, underneath seats, and doing solder with the length of time that it takes to do a solder and get the wires hot enough to melt it could potentially be hazardous. Doing it on the bench is quite a bit different than doing it while laying underneath a dash, and I think a crimp connect, especially one with the built-in heat shrinks, is a really good repair. I've seen wires fail before that fails if you do them right, and I think part of it is just Volkswagen trying to mitigate some of the risk involved in soldering wires. So good question, Ken. I like doing the crimp connections. They're faster to me. There's nothing wrong with soldering. If you're good at soldering, you can do a really, really solid repair and not have an issue with it. But again, I think most of it comes with the lack of ability for people to solder. So good question. Thanks for it. Next one comes from Andy. He says, hey, Charles, came across your collaboration with Engineering Explained. Awesome. Glad you liked the VR6 video. The DSG one hasn't come out yet, but I'll make sure I let you guys know about that. It says he's been looking for a Volkswagen technician to watch for a while. Awesome. That's cool. Thanks for that. He's a level 1 car maintenance, studying that in college, and he wants to become an apprentice at a local VW dealership. He's in England, which I think the difference in England and even Canada versus how it works in the United States is huge. So I'm not exactly sure what kind of process you guys have to have. Ours is pretty much non-existent. But he loves the Volkswagen brand and wants to become a Volkswagen tech. So he wanted to know what he could do to sort of stand out from everybody else. And this is actually a great question, Andy, not only for you specifically wanting to become a Volkswagen tech, but for any of you guys that are coming out of any type of automotive training, whether it's UTI, NTI, WyoTech, community college. What you have to understand is that when you graduate, that very first time you send out an application to someone, that person has probably gotten 100 million other applications that look identical to yours. The only difference is going to be your name and your work experience. So if your work experience really stands out, make sure you you highlight that. I had never worked in the automotive industry, fixing cars anyway, when I started at my dealership. So I made sure to really put my skills out as, teamwork, management, and that kind of stuff, sales, rather than just the generic resume that you get from graduating these programs. So what can you do to stand out other than just highlight the things that make you different? Man, it's all about attitude. It's all about a positive attitude, I should say. It's all about work ethic. These places are kind of rolling the dice on you. They don't know you from anybody, so they just see this generic platform, and it's not bad that it's so generic, because it needs to be appealing to everyone. But really highlight that. Really highlight positive attitude. Really highlight willing to do the extra that it takes to coming up as a young tech. Make sure you have good diagnostic skills. I don't think you need to say that you really like electrical work, because that's what every single UTI, NTI, Wyotech person has ever said. I think I said it too. I did, so I don't know how true it is for everybody else. I really did like it. It wasn't a stretch for me, but really make sure that your diagnostic skills are up to par. And for you specifically, Andy, and really for any of you guys that are going to a brand that you have an affinity for, make sure you tell people that. Make sure they know, it's not just that I want to fix cars. I want to fix these cars. I want to work on these cars. I want to be, to take my love for this brand, whether it's Volkswagen or Chevy or Ford, and I want to be put in an environment where I can share that, enthusiasm for the brand. So focus on those things, man, and you'll do just fine. Jeff asks, hey Charles, I have another question for you. The issue is carbon buildup on TSI 2.0 liter engines. There are rumors on GTI forums that doing an Italian tune-up, which apparently is holding the engine at 3,000 RPM for 30 minutes, which is funny. So I'm not sure where that comes from. If you guys know where that came from, post it in the comments, because I'd love to know. That's really funny. Anyway, he wants to know, doing that regular basis would minimize the carbon buildup. So what Jeff's talking about is carbon buildup on the newer 2.0 turbo. Actually, it's really been all the 2.0 turbo Volkswagen engines. These are the direct injection engines, which means fuel doesn't pass the valves, it goes right into the cylinder. This is actually a problem with all direct injection. BMWs have issues for years. They have special tools to clean it. I know Hyundai and Kia with their GTD or GDT, whatever the acronym is, they have issues with it. So this isn't a Volkswagen problem. This is a design concern, I'll say. I think manufacturers are starting to put an injector sort of between the throttle body and the intake valves to clean some of that carbon up. Jeff, I don't know how much that's really going to help once it's started. That may be a great thing to do very early on. 3,000 RPM for 30 minutes, that's a while, unless you're on the highway, and even then 3,000 RPM is kind of high. I think your fuel economy would definitely suffer, but $900 or whatever it costs to clean the valves on a 2-liter turbo, that buys a lot of fuel. So, I think for me, in my head, it makes sense that more full throttle accelerations on a regular basis is probably a good thing to do. The stuff that you put in the gas tank can't really do anything to prevent this. And I've seen zero through the intake cleaners that do really anything to get rid of this carbon once it's built up to the point where you really know about it. It may work as a preventative, but as a repair, it doesn't work. So far, the only way that I've seen to handle this problem is mechanically cleaning it, and that's removing the intake manifold, whether it's cleaning it with a media blaster or PIX or carbon cleaner, whatever way you do it. That seems to be the only way that I've seen that actually does work. I have a guy that's been bothering me to let him demo a treatment for our cars at the dealership, and I just really don't have the time for him, sadly. But if it winds up working out, I'll be sure to let you guys know whether it did or not, and all the company information. But I don't really want to talk about it until I know whether it does work or it doesn't work, and I don't think that would be fair to them. All right, Brian asks, as a technician, do I feel that the owner, when the owner tries to fix their own car, gets it over his head and then brings it to the shop for you to bail him out? How do I feel about that? I'm glad that at some point they realized they shouldn't have started this project that they're doing. It's happened to me a lot. Luckily, we've always been able to pull them out of the weeds, so to say. It's a tough call. It really is. Is it an issue where they got a door panel off trying to diagnose their window not working and, realized they couldn't make the repair? And they did a good job taking it apart and keeping everything organized. We talked about that a couple shows ago about how to stay organized. If it's a customer has disassembled their engine and brings you, here's a box of my parts, please put it back together for me. That's going to be expensive. That's going to be really expensive because, our labor times are built on what it should take the average technician to do a job. So if, let's say, replacing a cylinder head on a 1.8 turbo Passat pays, 10 hours, that would be if I started the job and I finished the job. When someone brings you a box of parts and a cylinder head and tows their car to the dealership, in your head you think, well, hey, he did half the work for you. You shouldn't charge him all of what it would take. Well, in my mind, I'm thinking, okay, not only do I have to unwind all of this unknown stuff, I have to sort through parts and put bolts where they're supposed to be. And usually you wind up paying more for me to unwind what you did and then make the repair than you would have if I just made the repair. Not all the time. The window example that I gave, I usually don't charge any more for that. I'll usually, just do it for whatever we would do it for. Maybe a little bit of a price break depending on how bad it really is. But I don't mind, man. I'd rather you bring it to me the minute you're in over your head than have a whole box of engine parts because you didn't know how to put it back together. But that was a good question, man. It doesn't happen a ton, but it does happen. It's happened a lot years ago, not so much these days. I think as cars get more complicated and more engine covers take up the whole engine bay, people tend to become a little more timid about the work that they're ready to tackle. So, good question, Brian. Thanks for that. This comes from Strawn. I was curious if I could show a breakdown of how the W8 engine in the Passats work like I did the VR. So for those of you that don't know, I mentioned it a minute or two ago in the show. Jason from Engineering Explained and I did a collaboration video all about the VR6. We used some of the VR6 parts I have here in the garage. We used my Cabby, which is parked just behind where the camera is, and explained all about how the VR6 worked. And Jason actually did a W16 video, which, Strawn, I think that'll probably answer all your questions. I'll put a link to Jason's W16 video in the show notes, so be sure and check that out. Also put a link to the VR6 video so you can see that too. The W16 is very similar to the W8. So just really quick, the VR6 is if you picture a V engine that's 90 degrees, the VR6 just pushes the cylinders in so that they're about 15 degrees or 10.6 depending on which VR. When you get into the W's, it's basically two VR6s in this shape, but it's VR6s. So like that and like that in a traditional V shape. But I'll put a link to Jason's video. He did a way better job explaining it than I just did with my stupid hand examples. So great question, man, and be on the lookout for those links. Hey, Charles, love the podcast. Thank you very much for that. They're useful in my day-to-day struggles as a technician. Man, don't I know that story. Just curious if I was selling the shirts that I was wearing in podcast episode 30. So The shirt he's talking about is the technician shirt that I have that has the Humble Mechanic embroidered on the chest. I had never considered selling those shirts. There's a a very limited batch of Humble Mechanic t-shirts that I did a couple of months ago. So if you guys have one of those, you're among like 40 people that own that t-shirt. I don't know, man. If you guys are interested in that, I'll look into it and see what I can do about getting some of those. They're not cheap, I can tell you that, but if you guys want them, I'll do whatever I can do to make that happen. So if you're interested in that, please post a comment in the comment section either on the blog or on YouTube, or email me, charles@humblemechanic.com, and put shop shirt in the subject and let me know if you'd be interested, and I'll look into it and see what what a batch of those would cost. It's never anything I really considered. I never really wanted to be in the apparel business, but you guys wanted t-shirts. All right, next up, another person that's seen the VR6 video. Thanks for watching, that's awesome. He has a Mark IV GTI VR6. All right, at about 3,000 RPM. On acceleration, he hears a rattle. He has heard that timing chains are an issue. Okay, there's two things that come to mind when you talk about 3,000 RPM on the older VR6, the 12 valve in his GTI. So his GTI would be like 99.5 to 02, I believe. I think in 03 is when the 4 valve per cylinder VR came out. So two things. One, timing chains very well could be an issue, and you want to get that addressed immediately. That's catastrophic engine damage if that's the case. Don't wait on taking a look at that and seeing whether or not you have timing chain noise. Usually you can put a stethoscope right on the timing cover or right behind the timing cover and pick that out. The other one is actually more common in my experience, and that's inside the intake manifold. There's a tumbler, so it just looks like a paper towel tube with holes in it, and it rotates. There's a little vacuum modulator on it that turns it based on engine load and driver command. And what happens is this thing rotates. There's plastic bushings that wear out in it, and what happens is you crack the throttle and it shakes like that. Or like this table does. And that'll make a pretty interesting sound. It's loud. If you catch it early enough, you can replace just that barrel. If you don't, I've experienced where it actually wears the intake manifold itself because it's all just plastic. So take a look at that. You can wrap the throttle from idle to wide open, or high load. And usually hear it or feel. If you put your hand on the intake manifold and have someone else do it, you can feel it. You can also disconnect the vacuum line to it and do it again and see if the noise changes. That's usually how I isolate that specific noise compared to a timing chain noise. So check those two things out, man, and go from there. Hopefully it's just that. There's also 1.5 million other things that can rattle. It can be a catalytic converter. It can be the shield on the oil pan. Those two sound very similar. So you got to do some investigation and get yourself a stethoscope or a long screwdriver and put the screwdriver up to your ear with the metal end wherever you're trying to listen for the noise, and hopefully you can narrow it down from there. Good question though. All right, next up, Bradley says, first, let's keep this short. Love the show. Thank you. And second, where did I buy that hat? He's actually talking about a different hat that I'm wearing, the trucker hat that I wore in the last viewer question show. I'll put a link to that with all the other drivers' gear as well. That hat specifically came from the dealership. We bought a ton of them, and service manager gave them out to all the employees, so I have a couple of them. Very cool hat. I don't wear hats a ton, really. This show is when the only time I wear hats, and a lot of times that's because I'm too lazy to do anything with my hair. So good question. One more I think we have time for. Javier asks, can I do a video on positive versus negative camber in a Volkswagen? Yeah, that's actually a great video on its own, and Javier, I think I can do that for you. So keep your eyes open for that. But really quick, so if we're sitting in the driver's seat of our vehicle, and these are our front tires, camber is the difference in angle between the top and the bottom. So if these are our tires, negative camber is going to be the top of the tire leaning in. Positive camber is going to be the top of the tire leaning out. These are really tire wear angles. A lot of what you see, it seems today, is a negative camber purely for aesthetics. You know, we'll do a whole show on this, I think, where we kind of dive into the dynamics of why you would want one versus the other. But from what I see, mostly when people have negative camber, severe negative camber, it's usually a fitment issue with their wheel tire package or just purely for the look. So good question, Javier. Thanks for that. All right, guys. Anyway, I'm going to wrap it up there. Thank you very much for watching. If you like the show, throw it a thumbs up on the YouTube. Don't forget to subscribe and share the show. A couple of you guys have asked me to do a time-lapse video of me at the shop. I actually did a test drive of that a couple of days ago, so I think I'm going to be able to make that work. There's a few things with the GoPro settings that I want to change, because I think it came out all right, but I think I can do a better job. So I'm going to try that again next week and let you guys know how that works out. You've also asked me so many times for a toolbox tour. I'm going to do it. I'm going to do it. Don't worry. I think that'll be a fun show. I do need to clean my toolbox up just a little bit because it's kind of a disaster right now. But I'm going to do that for you guys. I think that's a really cool idea, and honestly, one I never thought about. So if you guys have ideas like that for show topics or whatever, be sure to let me know. You know, email me or whatever, and let me know what you guys want to know about. So again, if you want to submit a question for a show like this, shoot me an email to charles@humblemechanic.com and put question for Charles in the subject. That way I know exactly what your email is for, and I can put it in the special folder and load it up on the laptop and answer it on a show. Don't forget, you can also follow me on Facebook, Twitter, Instagram, on the blog, humblemechanic.com, and you know, obviously on YouTube at YouTube, you know, Humble Mechanic on YouTube or whatever. There's links to all that stuff in the show notes, both on the blog and on YouTube. All right, guys, thanks for watching. Don't forget to post your comments as usual, and I will see you next time.